3 nights after the funeral, Emma couldn't sleep. She told herself it was grief, the kind that sits on your chest in the dark and won't let you breathe. But when she walked past the bathroom mirror that night, she saw something that made her stop. A shadow. Not hers. Tall. Still. Standing just behind her reflection. She spun around. Nothing. Just the hum of the radiator, the drip of the faucet, the empty room. Everyone told her it was normal. That loss does this. Plays tricks on your mind, makes you see things that aren't there. But here's what Emma didn't know yet. The man she buried wasn't the one who died. And the shadow on her wall, it wasn't a ghost. It was a witness. At first, Emma thought she was losing her mind, the flicker of movement in her peripheral vision. The creak of floorboards when no one else was home, the feeling, that cold, creeping certainty that she wasn't alone. But grief does that, doesn't it? It makes you see him in crowds, hear his voice in static, feel his hand on your shoulder in an empty room, except, what if it wasn't grief at all? What if someone was living inside her walls? Because here's what the police didn't tell her. Here's what his family refused to say. Michael Carter, the man she loved, the artist with the gentle hands and the crooked smile, wasn't who she thought he was. The funeral? It happened. The casket? It was closed. But the body inside? Emma never saw it. So who did she bury? And if Michael Carter is dead, then who's been watching her sleep? The answers Emma found didn't come from the police. They didn't come from his friends. They came from a place far more terrifying. They came from inside her own home. Emma Reed wasn't looking for love when she met him. She was 28, a graphic designer with a small apartment in Brooklyn and a carefully ordered life. The kind of person who color-coded her calendar and never missed a deadline. Her world was predictable, safe, exactly the way she liked it. Michael Carter was the opposite. He walked into her favorite cafe on a Tuesday in June 2021. Guitar case slung over his shoulder, hair too long, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it, which, she'd later learn, he probably had. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, and sat in the corner by the window playing chords so quietly she almost didn't hear them. But she did. And when he looked up and smiled at her, that was it. She was gone. For 6 months, they were inseparable. Late nights in his studio apartment, surrounded by half-written songs and empty takeout boxes. She'd work on her laptop while he recorded demos, the two of them existing in this quiet, comfortable orbit. He made her laugh, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. But Michael was complicated. He had this thing about identity. He'd ask her questions late at night when the city outside went quiet. Who are we, really, when no one's watching? If you could disappear tomorrow, start over as someone new, would you? At first, Emma thought it was just artist stuff. Existential rambling. The kind of deep thoughts you have at 2 a.m. with someone you're falling for. But then she started noticing things. Michael didn't have social media. Not anymore. He'd deleted everything. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, about a year before they met. Said it was freeing. Said he wanted to live in the real world, not the digital one. Emma thought it was romantic. Then there were the phone numbers. He changed them often. New SIM cards every few months. He said it was because of spam, telemarketers, nothing to worry about. She believed him. And the disappearances. He'd vanish for hours, sometimes overnight, without explanation. He'd come back tired, distracted, like he'd been somewhere far away. "Where were you?" she'd ask. "Just clearing my head," he'd say. She didn't push. She didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who asked too many questions, so she let it go. Over and over, she let it go. In December, for her birthday, Michael gave her a gift, a framed photograph of the two of them. It was from that first summer, the cafe. Golden hour light streaming through the windows, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling. She loved it. hung it on the wall across from her bed so she could see it every morning. But here's the thing. Emma never noticed, not then, not for months, that in the reflection of the glass there was someone else in the frame. A figure, blurred, standing just behind them in the cafe. Too far to make out a face, but close enough to have been watching. She never noticed that shadow until after he was gone. On March 14th, 2022, Emma got a phone call. Michael's brother, voice shaking. "There's been an accident. A car crash. Late at night. Icy roads. Michael's sedan wrapped around a tree on a back road upstate. No witnesses, no survivors. The funeral was small, closed casket. Emma sat in the front row, numb, surrounded by people she'd never met. His family, a few musician friends, faces she didn't recognize. She never saw the body. No one did. And 6 months later, Michael Carter was declared dead. But Emma was starting to wonder if he ever really died at all, because the shadow on her wall, it had his eyes. March 14th, 2022. 11:47 p.m. A state trooper found Michael Carter's car at the base of a ravine off Route 32, about 90 miles north of the city. The sedan had gone through the guardrail, tumbled down a steep embankment, and slammed into a cluster of trees. By the time emergency services arrived, the vehicle was already engulfed in flames. The fire burned hot, fast. By morning, all that was left was a blackened shell of twisted metal and ash. No body was recovered from the wreckage, but there was enough evidence. Blood on the steering wheel, fragments of clothing, dental records that matched items found in the car for investigators to assume fatality. The medical examiner's report listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma and thermal injuries. The case was straightforward, tragic, but straightforward. Icy roads, a sharp curve, a man driving too fast in the dark. The funeral was held 6 days later. Emma stood at the grave in a black dress she'd borrowed from her sister, staring at a casket she knew was empty. Michael's mother sobbed into her hands. His brother gave a eulogy about a man Emma barely recognized, stories from a childhood she'd never heard about, people she'd never met. She felt nothing, just numb, hollow, like she was watching it all happen to someone else. For weeks after, her friends checked in. Text messages she didn't answer, voicemails she couldn't listen to. Her therapist told her it was normal, that grief doesn't follow a timeline, that some days you'll feel fine and others you'll feel like you're drowning. Emma nodded, said all the right things. But she didn't tell her therapist the truth. She didn't tell anyone the truth. Because 3 weeks after the funeral, something changed. It started with the nights. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she'd see the crash, the fire, the empty casket. So she stayed awake, scrolling through her phone, watching TV with the sound low, anything to keep her mind from going to that place. And that's when she saw it, the shadow. It was 2:30 in the morning. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when she noticed something on the wall across from her, a shape. Tall still, like the silhouette of a man standing in her doorway. But her door was closed. She sat up slowly, heart pounding, and the shadow moved with her. Not like a reflection, not like her own shadow cast by the streetlight outside. This was different. The proportions were wrong. The posture was wrong. When she tilted her head, it tilted its head. When she raised her hand, it raised its hand. But when she lowered her hand back to the bed, the shadow kept its arm raised. Just for a second, just long enough for her to see. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She turned on the light. The shadow vanished. She turned it off again. Nothing. Just the faint glow of the city outside and the hum of the radiator. She told herself it was exhaustion, grief playing tricks, her mind trying to make sense of a loss that didn't make sense. But the next night, it was back. And the night after that. always in the same place, always at the same time, standing on her bedroom wall like it was waiting for something, like it was watching her. On the fourth night, Emma did something she hadn't done since the funeral. She spoke out loud. "Michael?" The shadow didn't move. "If that's you, if you're here, just give me a sign. Please." Nothing. And then, slowly, deliberately, the shadow lifted its arm again, not following her movements this time, moving on its own, reaching toward her. Emma screamed. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it, and dialed 911. She was crying, barely coherent, telling the operator there was someone in her apartment, someone watching her. Please send someone now. 2 officers arrived 14 minutes later. They searched every room, checked the closets, the bathroom, under the bed, looked out the windows, tested the locks. One of them, a younger guy with kind eyes, asked her gently if she'd been drinking, if she was on any medication, if there was someone they could call. Emma just shook her head. By the time they left, the shadow was gone. But she knew, even as she thanked them and closed the door, even as she triple-checked the locks and left every light in the apartment burning, she knew it would come back. Because whatever was on her wall, whatever was watching her in the dark, it wasn't finished with her yet. And deep down, in a place she didn't want to admit existed, Emma was starting to wonder if it had ever been a shadow at all, or if it had always been him. Emma didn't sleep for 3 days after that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow lifting its arm, reaching for her. So she stayed awake, lights on, back against the headboard, phone in her hand, waiting for dawn. On the 4th day, she went to a hardware store and bought 4 security cameras, the kind with motion sensors and night vision. She installed them herself, one in the bedroom, one in the living room, one pointing at the front door, and one in the hallway. She downloaded the app, set up alerts, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had some control. That night, she slept for 5 hours straight. When she woke up, the first thing she did was check the footage. Nothing. Just her, alone, tossing in her sleep. She exhaled, relief flooding through her. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been happening was just in her head, just grief, just trauma, and now that she had proof there was nothing there, she could start to move on. But that relief lasted exactly 1 week, because on the 8th day, Emma came home from work and noticed something strange. The kitchen chair, the one she always tucked under the table, was pulled out, just slightly, like someone had been sitting there. She stared at it for a long time, trying to remember if she'd left it that way that morning. She couldn't be sure. The next day, it was the bathroom window, unlocked. She knew. She absolutely knew she'd locked it the night before. She checked it every night now, part of her routine. Lock the door, lock the windows, check the cameras. But the latch was open. Then it was the food. A half-empty carton of orange juice in the fridge that she didn't remember opening. A loaf of bread with 2 slices missing. Small things. Things she could almost convince herself she'd forgotten. Almost. She went to the police again. Different precinct this time. Different officers. She brought printouts of the footage, a list of everything that had been moved or taken, dates and times. She tried to stay calm, tried to sound rational, but she could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. The officer behind the desk, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, listened patiently and then gently suggested Emma speak with a counselor. Trauma could manifest in unusual ways, she said. Grief could make you feel like you're losing control. It was nothing to be ashamed of. Emma left without filing a report. But there was one person who didn't dismiss her. Detective James Parker had been with the state police for 16 years, most of that time working cold cases and missing persons. He'd seen the initial report on Michael Carter's accident, signed off on it like dozens of others. But when Emma's name came across his desk again, flagged by the local precinct as a possible wellness check, something didn't sit right. He pulled the file, read through it again, and then he did something unusual. He reached out to Emma directly. They met at a coffee shop in her neighborhood. Parker was in his early 50s, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen too much but still managed to look kind. He ordered tea. She didn't order anything. He asked her to walk him through everything, from the beginning, and she did. The shadow, the cameras, the things that moved when she wasn't looking. He didn't interrupt, didn't take notes, just listened. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Can I see the footage?" Emma sent him everything that night. Hours of recordings, weeks of nothing, just her moving through her apartment alone. She didn't expect him to find anything. She barely believed there was anything to find anymore. But 2 days later, Parker called her. "I need you to look at something," he said. They met again, this time at his office. He pulled up a clip on his computer, one she'd watched a dozen times. It was from the hallway camera, 3:17 a.m., her apartment dark and still. "Watch the mirror," Parker said, pointing to the screen. Emma leaned in. There was a mirror on the wall at the end of the hallway, one she'd hung years ago and barely noticed anymore. In the footage, it reflected the dim light from the street outside, the edge of her coat rack, the corner of the kitchen. And then, for just a fraction of a second, something else. A distortion, a blur. Not a shadow exactly, but a shift in the light, a presence where there shouldn't have been one. Parker paused the video, zoomed in. The shape was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Tall. Human. "That's not a glitch," Parker said quietly. "That's someone standing in your apartment." Emma felt the room tilt. Parker ran the footage through enhancement software, isolating the audio. And that's when they heard it. Underneath the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside, there was something else. Breathing. Slow, steady, deliberate. Someone else's breath. Parker opened an investigation the next day. He pulled security footage from Emma's building, interviewed neighbors, checked for signs of forced entry. Nothing. But he didn't stop there. He started digging into Michael's background, his finances, his friends, looking for anything that might explain what was happening. And then, 2 weeks into the investigation, there was a break. A man was arrested outside Emma's building. His name was David Brennan, 34, no permanent address, a string of minor offenses on his record. He'd been seen loitering near her apartment multiple times, watching her through the lobby window, following her to the subway. Emma didn't recognize him, but when Parker showed her his photo, something cold settled in her chest. He looked like Michael. Not exactly, but enough. Same build, same dark hair, same hollow-eyed stare. Brennan was brought in for questioning. He admitted to following her, said he'd seen her at Michael's funeral, said he felt connected to her grief because he'd lost someone too. It was obsessive, disturbing, but not violent. Not illegal enough to hold him for long. Parker ordered a DNA test, comparing samples from Brennan to trace evidence found in Emma's apartment. A hair on her bathroom sink, fingerprints on the window latch. No match. Brennan wasn't the one in her apartment, which meant someone else was. Emma went home that night with a police escort, more cameras installed, a panic button by her bed. Parker assured her they'd figure it out, that they were close, that whoever was doing this would slip up eventually. She nodded, thanked him, locked her door, and then, at 2:43 a.m., her bedroom camera sent an alert. Motion detected. Emma grabbed her phone, hands shaking, and opened the app. The live feed loaded slowly, pixelated at first, and then sharp. Her bedroom. Empty. Still. And then, in the corner of the frame, near the closet, the shadows shifted. A figure stepped into view. Tall. Thin. moving slowly, deliberately, like it had all the time in the world. It stopped at the foot of her bed and turned its head toward the camera. Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't look away, because the face staring back at her, half hidden in darkness but unmistakable, was the face she knew better than her own. It was Michael. Emma stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. The figure stood at the foot of her bed, perfectly still, face turned toward the camera. The image was grainy, shadows cutting across his features, but there was no mistaking it. The slope of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, the way he stood with his weight on his left leg, a habit she'd memorized over 6 months of watching him play guitar in cramped apartments. It was Michael. Michael Carter, the man she'd buried, the man whose funeral she'd sat through in numb silence, the man whose ashes, she'd been told, were scattered somewhere upstate by his family. He was alive, and he was standing in her bedroom. Emma's hands were shaking so violently she nearly dropped her phone. She screamed, a raw animal sound that tore from somewhere deep in her chest, and bolted from the bed. She ran to the hallway, slammed her back against the wall, phone pressed to her ear as she called Parker. He answered on the second ring. "He's here," she gasped. "He's in my apartment. Oh God, he's alive. Michael's alive." Parker told her to get out, get to the hallway, get to a neighbor, get anywhere with people. He was already moving. She could hear car doors slamming, sirens starting in the background. He'd be there in 8 minutes. Emma ran. She didn't stop until she was outside, barefoot on the cold pavement, surrounded by neighbors who'd been woken by her screams. She stood there shaking, wrapped in someone's coat, watching the windows of her apartment like they might explode. When the police arrived, they stormed the building with weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Parker led the team, his face grim and focused. They found him in the crawl space, a narrow gap behind the bedroom wall, accessible through a panel in the closet that had been carefully loosened over time. Inside was a sleeping bag, bottled water, protein bars, a flashlight, and a laptop, still open, connected to a network of cameras he'd installed himself, cameras she'd never seen. Michael didn't run, didn't fight. When they pulled him out, he looked exhausted, thin, hollow-eyed and pale like he hadn't seen sunlight in months. Because he hadn't. He'd been living there, behind her walls, the entire time. At the station, Parker sat across from him in the interrogation room, recording running, and asked the only question that mattered. "Why?" Michael stared at his hands for a long time before he answered. The story came out slowly, piece by piece, like pulling thread from a worn fabric. 2 years before he met Emma, Michael had gotten involved with the wrong people. A group running money through the music scene, using unsigned artists and small venues to launder cash from God knows where. Michael needed the money. His career was going nowhere. He was drowning in debt, and they offered him a way out. He took it. For a while it worked. He played shows, moved cash, kept his head down. But then the operation got sloppy. People started asking questions. Federal agents started showing up at venues, and Michael realized too late that he wasn't just a small player anymore. He knew names, faces, bank accounts. He knew too much. They told him to disappear, quietly, completely. No goodbyes, no traces, just gone. And if he didn't, if he tried to run or go to the police, they'd make sure he disappeared permanently. So Michael did what he did best. He became someone else. He staged the accident, paid someone to torch a car with enough forensic evidence to make it believable. Blood, clothing, dental fragments from a cadaver he'd bought off the black market. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to be good enough. And it was. The authorities bought it, his family bought it, Emma bought it. But here's the part that made Parker's jaw tighten. The part that made Emma feel like the ground was falling away beneath her. Michael didn't leave. He could have. Could have taken the new identity he'd built, the cash he'd stashed, and started over somewhere far away. But he didn't. He came back to Emma's apartment, found the crawl space during one of his late-night disappearances months before, the ones she'd never questioned. He loosened the panel, stocked it with supplies, and when the time came, he moved in, behind her walls. "Why?" Parker asked again, and this time his voice was hard. "Why her? Why stay?" Michael finally looked up and his eyes were wet. "Because I loved her," he said quietly, "and I couldn't let go." Emma was allowed into the observation room to hear this. Parker had asked if she was sure, if she was ready, and she'd nodded because she needed to hear it from him, needed to understand. But when those words left his mouth, when he said he loved her, something inside her shattered. She asked to speak to him. Parker hesitated, but she insisted. So they brought her in, sat her across from Michael in that cold, fluorescent room, and for the first time in 6 months, they were face to face. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you just tell me?" Michael's face crumpled. "Because you would have stopped me," he said. "You would have tried to save me, tried to fix it, and I couldn't let you do that. I couldn't let you get pulled into this. So you let me think you were dead." Her voice broke. "You let me grieve you. You let me fall apart. And the whole time you were right there, watching me. I'm sorry. You were in my home, Michael, in my walls, watching me sleep, listening to me cry. That's not love. That's... She couldn't finish. The words wouldn't come. Michael reached across the table and she jerked back like he'd burned her. "I wanted to protect you," he said desperately. "I wanted to make sure you were okay, that you were safe." "From who?" Emma's voice rose, sharp and cutting. "From them? Or from you?" Michael didn't answer. Parker stepped in then, ending the interview. Michael was formally arrested, charged with fraud, obstruction of justice, stalking, breaking, and entering. The federal agents would come for him later, for the money laundering, the conspiracy charges. He'd be gone for a long time. Emma watched them take him away in handcuffs, watched him look back at her one last time with those sad, desperate eyes. And she felt nothing, just empty. 3 weeks later, Emma moved out of the apartment. Couldn't stay there, couldn't sleep there, couldn't even walk past the building without feeling like the walls were closing in. She found a new place across town, smaller, brighter, no crawl spaces, no shadows. Parker checked in on her regularly, made sure she was okay, made sure Michael's associates weren't looking for her. They weren't. As far as they knew, Michael Carter was dead, and Emma was just another grieving girlfriend who'd moved on. She started seeing a new therapist, started sleeping through the night again, started believing, slowly, that maybe she could put this behind her. But some nights, when the apartment was quiet and the city outside had gone still, Emma would catch herself staring at the walls, listening, waiting. Because the thing about shadows is, once you've seen them, once you know what they can hide, you never stop looking. And deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, Michael was still watching, still waiting in the dark. 6 months later, Emma was living in Philadelphia. A fresh start. New job, new apartment, new routines. She'd cut her hair short, changed her number, deleted every photo of Michael from her phone. She wanted to be someone different, someone who hadn't been haunted, someone who could sleep without checking the locks 3 times before bed. For a while, it worked. The new apartment was on the 4th floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and tall windows that let in afternoon light. No crawl spaces, no hidden panels, just open, honest space. She felt safe there. Or at least, she was learning how to feel safe again. But then, on a Tuesday night in September, it happened. She was getting ready for bed, brushing her teeth in the bathroom, when she saw it in her peripheral vision. That familiar shape on the wall. Tall, still, like someone standing just outside the frame of the mirror. Her heart stopped. She turned slowly, toothbrush still in her hand, and stared at the shadow on the pale green wall of her bedroom. It was faint, barely there in the dim light, but unmistakable. The same posture, the same proportions. Emma's breath came shallow and fast. She told herself it was a coincidence, a trick of the streetlight outside, a passing car, anything but what her mind was screaming at her. She called Parker the next morning. He'd stayed in touch, checking in every few weeks, making sure she was adjusting. When she told him about the shadow, his voice went quiet. "Emma, Michael's in custody. He's been in custody this whole time." "Then check," she said. "Please, just check the roster. Make sure." Parker promised he would. He called her back 3 hours later, and his voice sounded different, strained. "I checked the federal database," he said carefully. "Michael Carter's name isn't in the system." Emma felt the floor drop out from under her. "What do you mean it's not in the system?" "I mean there's no record of his incarceration, no transfer, no holding facility, nothing. It's like he was never processed. But we saw him arrested. You arrested him. I know, I was there. But Emma, something's not right. I'm making calls, trying to figure out what happened. But right now, I need you to be careful. Lock your doors. Don't go anywhere alone. I'm going to send someone from the local PD to do a welfare check." Emma hung up and sat on her couch, staring at nothing. Her mind kept going back to something Michael had said once, late at night in that apartment in Brooklyn, when they were still just two people falling in love. They'd been talking about art, about identity, about the masks people wear, and he'd looked at her with those dark, serious eyes and said something she'd thought was beautiful at the time. "If I ever disappear, just remember, shadows don't die. They follow the light." She'd kissed him then, thought it was poetic, romantic even. Now it made her skin crawl. Over the next few days, Emma tried to convince herself she was imagining things. Parker was looking into it. The police were aware. Michael was either in custody somewhere under a different name or what. She didn't want to think about the alternative. But the shadow kept appearing, always at night, always when she was alone. And then, on Friday evening, as she was coming home from the grocery store, her neighbor stepped out of the apartment across the hall. Mrs. Chen, a kind woman in her 70s who always smiled and asked about Emma's day. "Oh, Emma, have you met the new tenant yet?" Mrs. Chen asked, gesturing to the door directly across from Emma's. Emma froze, bag still in her hands. "New tenant?" "Yes, such a quiet young man. Moved in about 2 weeks ago, very polite. He plays guitar sometimes, beautiful music. You can hear it through the walls if you listen closely." The grocery bag slipped from Emma's fingers. Apples rolled across the hallway floor. "What does he look like?" Emma's voice came out strangled. Mrs. Chen tilted her head, thinking. "Oh, tall, dark hair, keeps to himself mostly. I've only seen him once or twice. Why, dear, are you all right?" Emma didn't answer. She grabbed her bags, fumbled with her keys, and threw herself into her apartment, slamming the door behind her. She locked it, bolted it, shoved a chair under the handle. Her phone was ringing. "Parker." She answered. "Emma, listen to me carefully. Michael was released on a technicality, some kind of clerical error with the arrest warrant. It happened 3 weeks ago. I just found out. I'm on my way to you now, but I need you to get out of that apartment. Right now." But Emma wasn't listening anymore, because she was standing in front of her bathroom mirror, phone pressed to her ear, and in the reflection behind her, clear as day, was a silhouette. Standing in her bedroom doorway, tall, still, watching. She should have turned around, should have screamed, run, fought. But she didn't. Instead, Emma stared at the reflection, at the shadow that had followed her across state lines. Through new locks and fresh starts and every promise she'd made herself that she was free. And in that moment, she understood something terrible. Some ghosts don't need to be dead. Some shadows don't need darkness. And some people never really let go. Emma closed her eyes, and this time, she didn't turn around. So what do you think really happened that night? Was Michael Carter ever truly gone? Or did Emma's grief create a shadow where there was only empty space? Did he orchestrate everything from the beginning, watching her unravel from behind the walls? Or was there something darker at play, something we'll never fully understand? Maybe the truth is simpler than we want to believe. Maybe Michael was just a man who couldn't let go, who chose obsession over freedom, who loved her in the only broken way he knew how. Or maybe, just maybe, Emma never escaped at all. I want to hear what you think. Drop your theory in the comments below. Was Michael the villain, or was he a victim of his own making? Did Emma imagine the shadows, or are they still following her right now, in whatever city she's moved to, in whatever life she's trying to build? I'm reading every single comment, every theory, every question, and if this story kept you watching, if it pulled you in and wouldn't let go, then you need to hear what happens when betrayal strikes on what should be the happiest day of your life. Next up, he betrayed me on our wedding night, so I became his biggest nightmare. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. Hit subscribe.